Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and cats peeps. And yep, you know what that means. I'm joined again by my great friend Kat. Hey, Kat.
Hey, Kelsi.
How you doing? We're talking slashers.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So this is another one of our slasher chats, guys. We've actually had a few chats as of now. I'll link all chats that have been released down below in the YouTube description, so please check those out if you haven't already seen them. We've talked about a lot of great movies, but today we're talking about one in particular, and we're going to do a deep dive into this particular movie. It's Sleepaway Camp from 1983. So an oldie, but in my opinion, I had never seen it, but now I'm going to consider it a goodie, because I overall enjoyed it quite a bit. Which is not really a spoiler, but there will be spoilers in terms of story plot points discussed in this chat. So if you guys have not seen this movie, I would advise you stop watching our chat right now, go watch the movie, and come back if you want to hear our thoughts. Because we're going to be giving away big plot points, including a huge reveal at the end. And this is a pretty famous horror movie in terms of like a cult classic. And so a lot of people might already know the twist. So if you don't mind just the movie being discussed, even if you haven't seen it, but you already know what happens, then you can keep watching. But again, if you don't want any spoilers or anything messed up for you, go back and watch the movie first. Because yeah, we're going to go into things. Yeah. All right, so quickly, before I throw it to Kat, I'm going to give you guys a synopsis and the ratings. So the ratings are 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb. Sleepaway Camp got 78% ratings on Rotten Tomato, and 90% of Google users like Sleepaway Camp. So that's a pretty high number.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, kind of a cult classic type of film. A lot of people who are hardcore horror fans especially like it.
Yes, I agree.
And here is the synopsis. So Angela Baker, who's one of our main characters, she is a shy, traumatized young girl and is sent to summer camp with her cousin, Ricky. Shortly after her arrival, anyone with sinister or less than honorable intentions towards her gets their comeuppance. So to me, even that, because now I could say we can go into things, but even with that description, I think it's almost a little spoilery, kind of giving you, wonderings like who's making people pay for hurting Angela. Is it the cousin? Is it Angela? But to me, even the description kind of hints towards Angela. Mm-hmm. But let's dig into it, Kat. What'd you think about this movie overall?
Well, I had never heard of the movie, and the only reason I put it on my list was because it was on your list. And I figured let's have a couple of movies, that we're going to watch together so we can, have some in-depth discussions about it.
Yes.
I kind of figured it's a little bit more underrated than, normal slasher movies that we've, consider like hardcore slasher, like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. I think maybe it's due to how dated it is. I mean, as opposed to looking at how other movies that were shot in the 80s, I don't know, they don't just seem as dated as this movie did, but it is supposed to be considered one of the greatest horror cult classics, despite the fact that it's not as scary as other slasher films. But although if you kind of think about it, you have a lot of kids, getting killed at a summer camp, which generally we're used to seeing like teenagers, young adults or whatever, getting it more so than young children. I also think that because the acting is not so great, because I believe they used mainly child actors, that were more their age, 13, 14, 15, instead of trying to get older actors to play younger children. Also, too, I just thought it was hilarious that the boys show more skin than the girls. So when you think about other horror films, other slasher films, it's usually the young girls and they're always scantily clad. In this case, it was the guys.
It was great.
I texted you immediately and was like, the clothes are just like cracking me up. Like the half shirts on the guys, like what's the point?
I know. In fact, we discussed this in our Fear Street chat that we had, not long ago. And we mentioned it because one of the Fear Street movies takes place at summer camp. And we were just talking about how funny Sleepaway Camp was in terms of the clothing and how the guys wearing short shorts, and you kind of got a little feel of that from Fear Street as well, but not as much as Sleepaway Camp.
No,
I mean, some of those guys' pants, it was insane.
It was definitely insane.
It made me laugh.
then another thing too is you didn't really see a lot of the kills, so in that aspect, it didn't have the same gore factor
Right.
that you used to. So I think that's what gives it the impression of not being, you know, in the same category as like Friday the 13th or Halloween, kind of thing. But with that being said, I did like it
Yeah.
because there were a lot of disturbing elements to it. And the ending is the most bizarre ending I've ever seen, and one that I'll never forget. Like, once you've seen it, you're just like, oh my gosh. And then it almost makes you feel like there were little breadcrumbs along the way, revealing little clues about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it all makes sense at that point. You almost want to go back and rewatch the film again to just like jot down exactly when all of these things took place. But take it away. Give us some more.
I just have a lot to say in terms of this movie is crazy. And I do agree with all of those weak points that you pointed out. Like, the kid actors kind of made the acting a little bit corny. But at the same time, I think that's one of the elements that almost adds more creepiness to it, because so you have Angela, which I believe was played by like a 13-year-old girl for the most part, except for that crazy final scene in which they could not use a child. Obviously, they had to use like a college guy and basically put a mask over the guy to make it look like 13-year-old Angela. So, which is basically our big twist here. So basically, we were wondering, who's the killer? Is it Ricky? Is it Angela? It's basically Angela, but not only do we find, is it Angela? Angela is not Angela. Angela is Peter. She's a boy this whole time, kind of disguised as a girl, but not on her own accord. It was
Right.
forced on her by her aunt. This
Her
lifestyle.
insane aunt. So
Yes.
it's like dun dun dun.
So all this is revealed near the end, and you're like, whoa, my mind is flipping blown.
Mhm.
This is crazy. And that's why it like sticks with you, and you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. But I think part of, like you said, the child actor thing, the idea that Angela was actually played by a 13-year-old for the most part, and the whole idea of the actress having to live with the fact of that famous last scene for like her whole life afterwards, like I can't even fathom. So yes, it's not in the same category or stratosphere as other slashers, but in a way I can totally see the cult appeal because of so many factors. Like, one, this movie would never work today,
Oh, no.
for a number of reasons. One being that like the implications of a 13-year-old playing a girl who's actually a boy would follow the actress around. Like, I don't even know how the actress was fine with that growing up. If this movie was bigger, it would have probably been a bigger problem. If this was more mainstream, like Halloween, this would have been a huge problem maybe in her life. But luckily, maybe it wasn't as big in terms of affecting her as a person growing up. Because,
Right.
kids are mean. She's 13. People bullying her. You played a girl who was a guy. Are you really a girl? Just
Mhm.
imagine the implications of all of that. So
Right.
one, that's why it couldn't go on today. And two, just it would be totally a hard topic to tackle today appropriately.
Exactly.
Yes. So there's all
Yeah.
these factors that make it really a special movie in terms of it couldn't have worked at any other time, I think, in history. It could
Mhm.
only really happen to that point in the 80s. I don't know. Otherwise, how could it have worked at all?
Well, and really, truly, in the early 80s, I don't even know if it really could have worked in later 80s.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Not even in the
compare like
90s.
yeah, like if you really compare a lot of the movies that we've been watching in the 80s, even the 70s. I mean, you and I have had conversations about some of the like either the language or the way women are portrayed or the way men talk to women. I mean, we saw that when we watched Black Christmas. I was really shocked by some of the stereotypes and the things that happened. That was 1974. So I do think there's things that happened in the 70s and early 80s that could not be, you know, done nowadays. I
Yeah,
mean,
like a lot of that stuff from back then, we would think it'd be all vanilla, but no, there's some controversial stuff from
mhm,
the 70s and 80s. Like you said, you referenced Black Christmas, some of the discussions that the women had. I was surprised that we're having those discussions so openly in a film from the 70s. I couldn't remember that
mhm.
being a prominent thing, but it's surprising. It'd almost be harder to do something like that a little bit later. in a different era. So it's very fascinating to sit and think about it. And I think one of the most effective things about Sleepaway Camp is like all of these psychological things at play. So as you referenced, it might not be as scary as Halloween, Friday the 13th, in terms of kills. It's not even as grotesque. But in terms of the psychological elements that just disturb you, like, I think it's horrifying to make someone live a life that they didn't choose, make someone live a life like they're basically can't be who they are. That's terrifying in a different way. So this is a very different type of slasher. It's a lot deeper in a way than just the surface level.
Well, and also too,
well,
first of all, we have an origin story, so we understand, partly what how this comes about. It's not like Angela Baker goes off to camp for the first time with her cousin Ricky with the intention of wanting to kill people, which is very different than some of our slasher movies that we've seen in the past. Usually, like for example, Halloween, you get a little snippet in the original, but we don't have the movie as a whole of what's happened in the present moment time until, Michael Myers escapes from the asylum and comes back, to the town where, his infamous murder as a child took place. Friday the 13th, same thing. It's like an after effect thing that, this killer has been doing these things. So I feel like, you have a little bit of information in the very beginning. We know that Angela is sent to the aunt and to Ricky. You and I were kind of discussing a little bit before, like, is it really probable that Ricky wouldn't have known that Angela was a boy when he came to live with the family? It is probable if they were families that were not very close and the aunt just happens to be the only remaining survivor, that Angela can be placed with at the time. At the time she's placed as Peter, but the aunt we know is kind of cuckoo. And she decides, I already have a boy, so I'm going to raise this, child as a girl. No one will know the difference because, and that makes sense to me if they never were close to them.
Yeah, they might not have even lived close. And that would explain why Ricky wouldn't have seen his cousin.
Right. And so the fact that what's scary to me and
or Ricky didn't question it and thought that the sibling that died was told maybe the sibling that died was Peter. Exactly. I didn't even think about that. So maybe he was just lied to and said Peter was the one who died. Angela is coming to live with us.
Think about it. Ricky is only a year older than Angela. So when you think about that, say for example, we were trying to estimate what we thought the age would be. If she was maybe 4 or 5, when coming to live with the aunt, and then think about it, scarred from the fact that she was actually in the accident with her sibling and her father. Both of them die in the accident. We've heard of stories where a child that's in some kind of a traumatic situation can't talk, because they were traumatized, by something so that they don't speak. So that's not totally out of the realm of possibilities that because the child might have been, like not one that really interacted, that wouldn't have caused any kind of a pause. And if the aunt knowingly is going to make Peter Angela and live as a girl, she would have done everything in her power to make sure that Ricky and Angela never interacted to where her secret would be revealed of what she was doing. So it really is, though, kind of interesting to me to think that the aunt was willing to allow Angela to go to camp without her, and just Ricky.
Well, she did emphasize to Ricky, take care of her. Maybe almost really placing the burden on Ricky. And that's why he was so protective at camp, because not that he knew why, but his mom was very protective, obviously, of Angela. And so he, knowing how protective she was, but never knowing the reason why, just knowing that she's protective. That's why he took her defense so seriously all the time against everybody and anybody who would pick against Angela. And so, but it is surprising, really thinking about it.
I know, when you think about it.
Why would you let her out of your sight?
This is the first time Angela's getting to go. We know that Ricky has been to camp before because he has had a previous relationship with Judy, who's horrible.
I even wrote down Judy is an ass.
Yeah.
Judy's a jerk.
She is, but if you think about it, he's been there. And was this only the second time he's been to camp, or has he been to camp several times? What prompted the aunt to allow Angela to go at this point, and so then you just wonder if you really think about it, the aunt's got to know that they go swimming,
Yeah.
they are going to be interacting with you know the opposite sex. Like, I
Yeah.
just don't understand how she would think. I mean, Angela's attractive. She's not like some kind of like homely child that would be like a wallflower somewhere, so obviously, and if she's new to camp, that's going to draw more attention to her because she is new. Now,
Right.
I mean, obviously she is shy and she doesn't talk, so it makes her seem like she's a loner and an outcast. And of course the camp counselor guy, who's in charge of it, understands the traumatic experience that she's been in, so they're going to make some kind of concessions for her. But I just think it just seemed a little odd to me that the aunt would have relinquished the control that she's had over this child for so long and put her in a situation that could have revealed, this big secret.
I guess to her, maybe she thought, okay, this will get Angela out of her shell. Maybe she will finally accept who she is. She's staying with other girls. She'll really feel like another girl, instead of just being around Ricky. But obviously, we don't really know what the intent was or what the thoughts were of the aunt. But something that helps kind of infer why maybe Peter, now Angela, wouldn't have pushed back against being almost forced into living as a girl is those flashbacks at the end. So that gives
Hmm.
us a little more reasoning into things, because you and I were talking about just like it's kind of unbelievable as to why the aunt would be okay with sending her because the secret could be revealed. It was also kind of unbelievable, why would Peter/Angela just accept living as a girl when he's a guy? But the flashbacks show us, one, that the father of Peter/Angela had a gay relationship. And so seeing that, maybe he thought, okay, well, if I'm interacting with guys that way and living as a girl, it's not that abnormal from what my dad was doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So all this confusion coupled with the trauma from the accident really just kind of adding into the confused psyche of Peter/Angela and kind of made him ripe for control almost
Well, yeah,
by the
that,
aunt.
and also too, when I was doing research for this, the possibility of the aunt not approving of the lifestyle of the father. And then if she is the only person that can be the caregiver of this child who now has no family, because we don't even know what happened to the biological mother of these children, she's bringing in a child and she has a boy already. So you
Yeah,
almost wonder if, I have this situation where I'm bringing another boy in, could it possibly be that they end up in a relationship that I didn't approve of with my own brother?
right.
So that is kind of something that was kind of insinuated in some of the information that I saw. But which to me is like, again, that's your weird agenda, meaning the aunt. That's her
Yeah.
weird agenda that would even be a possibility or whatever. I mean, regardless of whether she dresses her as a girl or dresses her as a boy, Angela/Peter is traumatized.
Yes, yes, in many ways. I mean, lost your complete family, doesn't understand what you're seeing, being forced to live a lifestyle that he did not choose.
Hmm.
I mean, all of this together is just ripe for a breaking point, which is what happens at camp. So I
Right,
think that's
right.
kind of fascinating, and it makes it a really different type of slasher. And that's what appealed to me. And the cool thing is, as well, I didn't say this, but you had mentioned how you were super surprised and it was crazy, the ending, and you weren't expecting it. But I actually knew the ending. So we both had never seen it before, but I had heard about the ending long before. I just didn't know like the surrounding circumstances of the ending. I knew that it was revealed that Angela was actually a boy, and we
Right,
see a penis to prove
right.
that he's a boy, really.
Which
And
was
there's,
another shocking thing to me, that they did this in a film.
yeah,
Because even though we know that an adult male portrays, the reveal, Peter, at the end, and he's wearing a mask basically of Angela. I mean, it's supposed to be Angela, but they actually molded her face and made her face,
yeah, there's a Collider. It's called Collider, the website. There's an article that Collider released that talked about how they had to pay a college a male college student to go and wear this mask of Angela, and obviously it was a mask so it couldn't move. That's why you see that immobile face.
Right, right. Well, and
Yeah.
then that made sense to me once you and I were talking about that, because I'm like, that is what freaked me out. The whole thing freaked me out at the end, only because one, I had never seen it, knew nothing about the surprise ending. So like I was basically speechless,
Yeah.
about it. But I couldn't get the image out of my mind. And then, realizing we're talking with you that it was actually like a mask and that's why it was frozen in place. Well, then that makes sense. It just didn't look, I don't know, it just made it more horrifying, I
And
guess.
another layer of this too is that crazy sound that
Yes,
is coming out of Angela.
guttural growling sound, almost like just the wildness. Like, I almost kind of felt like, and I could just be stretching here, but it was almost like for so long Peter had to be a girl, and this was all his pent up frustration coming out and being revealed that, like, I want to be who I'm supposed to be,
Right.
kind of thing. It's like almost rage, like a guttural growling instead
Especially
of
since
rage.
he is not accepted. You and I were speculating before we started our chat and recorded it. We speculated that he kills, you know, Ricky's friend who was almost trying to date Angela. He
Hmm.
kills him because he finally reveals that, oh, well, this is who I am. I'm a man. Like, you want to make out with me? Let's make out. Let's take off our clothes. And once he sees who Angela really is, he doesn't accept. And so when Angela's not being accepted for who he is, because technically he is a male, but living as a female. So once he's not accepted yet again, it wasn't accepted by his aunt, not accepted by this new boy, loses it even further and kills. Now there are
Hmm.
theories that there's two killers that both Ricky and Angela killed. Like I read a whole article on speculation about, they both could have been killing, but that, obviously Angela might have actually killed the boy at the end. That makes sense, but that perhaps Ricky was killing other people. But I don't believe that. I think it was all Angela personally.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was a little, I don't know. Some of the kills were a little bit, like some of them I could see the motivation behind it. Others I could not. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, you know, when the young kids are killed at the camp out, like what
Mm-hmm.
was the motivation for that?
Yeah,
Because
you're
those
right.
children were not really anything to do with like terrorizing her, because like backing up from the very beginning, Angela comes, she's very quiet, she's super shy, painfully shy. It's almost even painful to watch sometimes, like the interactions, because she's not saying anything. And right from the beginning, when she meets Judy, I mean, Judy makes some kind of really crude reference that she's as flat as a board or something like that. I don't know if you had seen that little
Mm-hmm.
reference, you know, um, like she's something related to being a carpenter or something like that. Flat as
Yeah.
a board and ready to screw or something like that. And I'm like, it was so harsh. I'm just thinking, why would that come out of a young child's mouth, you
Not
know?
only Judy, but the other counselor, one of the counselors in the bunk that Angela was staying at, was also very mean and very hateful towards Angela.
Yeah, and it was just weird, very weird to me. So you can see the people that are starting to like get on her list. Like if she was going to have a hit list,
Yeah.
it would comes out pretty,
Yeah, but the little
at the
kids,
very
you're right.
beginning. But the only thing I couldn't figure out was that was the one scene where what was the motive for that? Everybody that got killed in the movie deserved it from Angela's point of view, because
Right.
they either, were mean spirited to her, or, they were picked on her, or they, tried to, and really and truly, when she even got kissed by the young guy that likes her, she kind of pushes away, which is like a clue that, something. But again, you think it's just because she's shy, she doesn't have any experience, first
Right.
time, she's got somebody noticing her, whatever. And I really do think she does like him,
Yeah.
but is just torn, like, is this right or not? And I guess
It's
that's
all
where
this
the flashback,
conflicting things. Like
yeah,
I've
the
seen this, I've
flashback
seen
comes out,
that.
because think about it, her dad was in a relationship, so it must have been okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it
So
was her
she
dad
is
and she
just
loved
so
her dad.
conflicted inside. Like, who am I
But,
really?
and that's the thing, you don't see what transpires at the end of the movie. We can only assume, we can only imagine that it gets to the point that she decides to take a risk and reveal who she truly is. I can imagine that the young guy shows disgust or shock or confusion himself. Whatever it is triggers her, and then it's revealed to all of us about the situation. But I don't know. I just don't really, that was the only thing that left me. And I don't know if it was supposed to be a red herring. Maybe it was
Yeah.
supposed to get us off of the track and maybe to think that possibly Ricky was one of them. Because remember, the camp director assumes that Ricky, which I
Yeah, the
thought was
whole
kind
thing,
of
they
weird.
want to mislead you into thinking it's
Right.
possibly
I mean,
Ricky.
he thinks it's Ricky and even tries to harm Ricky or whatever. And then shortly after, he meets his demise, which I just thought was kind of a little far fetched because Ricky had attended camp before with this camp director. It's like, why all of a sudden would Ricky just all of a sudden just, you've been to camp before. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And he's all like, I should have taken care of him long ago. Oh! And it was just way over the top. The acting there was corny. But I gotta say, even though I knew the ending, I really liked how everything played out because it made me think and be like, whoa. Like, even though I knew the reveal, it still kind of was mind blowing in a different way because you just want to peel back all the layers.
mm,
And it would kind of make sense why somebody under that kind of strain would break. So
right,
that made it a
right.
little more extra fascinating. But I will say, what I found even more disturbing and creepy than the kills were the freaking pedophiles in the
Oh,
movie and the
yes.
creepos in the movie. So the camp director, we mentioned
Ugh.
him, about to have an affair with a camp counselor, just like very gross.
Mhm.
But also, even further, the first person who basically gets killed, and well, not killed actually, he's just really burned, is the cook who tries to take advantage of Angela. He's essentially a pedophile. And our first interaction with him is he's watching the kids come by and he's like
Ugh.
licking his lips. And like
Ugh, it's disgusting.
all these cooks are hearing how he's talking young meat. And they're like, they're kind of young. Oh, and there's no such thing as too young. Like, dude, like all these guys are sitting around and they're okay with this guy saying this. You're working at a summer camp. You're literally a pedophile and nobody is bothered. Nobody's like, we've got to report him. What the hell is going on?
It was gross. It was
That
so
was the
gross.
grossest part.
And
Like,
believe me, I was so excited when he got it. I
me
was
too.
like, he
And that
deserved it.
makeup looked really good.
I know.
Yeah, like that I actually liked that part. I thought that was well done.
Now I do have to do the saying about the like cornball situations here, like with
Yeah.
the reactions from the actors and stuff. It's almost like they cut the scene while they were actually filming. Like just stand there for 5 minutes as we get your reaction. But that and when the guy was on the shore at the beginning when that boating accident happened, it's like they discover something horrific and it's like,
Like he just
okay,
stands
like
there.
they just stand there. They don't react. They don't do anything. Like
We,
if
we don't know that they're lovers then, but even if they were friends, like jump in and save your friend.
Well, and it's the same with the guy on the ground. It's like the other cook comes in and he's like,
I know he just
and
pauses
then it
there.
shoots to the guy with the bubbling skin, and then it's like,
They
why
don't
are
do
you not
anything.
moving? Like, why he didn't run back out and scream, help,
Yeah,
help?
and the little girl during the boating accident, like the a different girl was like, "Oh my god, someone help him!" And like the guy's just standing there, like, and it's his freaking lover. But at the time, we just think at least it's his best friend or something,
Yeah, but
and
even
he's
if it was a
doing
best
nothing.
friend, even if it was a stranger, like
Jump
we just like
in.
yes, people would be like running towards trying to help. I mean, I don't know. That was one of my things that was like, okay, what have I gotten into with this movie? I mean, but it was like that kind of like a lot of different things. It was sort of like the way it was cut. It was like, okay, we're gonna go back and do reaction shots to this. Like, so it wasn't like really even happening at that moment.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, you know how I like corny stuff. So
I know you
that
do.
added to for me, I was like, yeah, I like that part. I don't know, whatever. I'm so weird. But let's talk about the kill since we kind of touched lightly on it with the burn. I thought that one was creative. And we've discussed this in other chats. You know, what makes a slasher? And I just want to lightly touch on it. There are weapons used, there are knives used. So this, I think, does classify as a slasher. And it doesn't just have to be knives. You know, obviously, we've talked about this before. You can have, pointy objects, all kinds of different things. But it's very rare to have something like a gun. And this one doesn't have a gun. Whereas we talk about Terrifier, it did have a gun, but people still call that one a slasher too. So I think Sleepaway is even more of a slasher than like Terrifier.
It does, but we did, we're realizing that, even though it is considered a slasher, and conventionally we think about something being done with blades or even unconventional blades, like even if it was a chainsaw or something like that, we've also discovered that, it can still be a slasher film if it has the other elements, that make it a slasher. However, what's being used to kill, is not always as important, as long as
Right.
it has all the underlying, elements as well.
What makes
Because
us think it's important are those iconic movies that we all know of. It's like Halloween, Friday the 13th. Those are the things that kind of bias us into thinking, well, it has to have a
well,
knife all the time.
yes, and that's the other thing too. I mean, it wasn't until we had actually watched Terrifier that came to my mind was, he used
What
a
makes a
gun.
slasher?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what makes what qualifies as a slasher? And so I went down that rabbit hole and discovered it's not necessarily that it has to have that, as long as they have other elements with it.
Right.
Now, with that being said, knives are used, in
Yeah.
this movie for sure,
Well,
but
teenagers also
this
are
is
involved, all
well,
kinds of stuff.
and I think for the point of this is, like we talked about, Angela didn't come to camp with the intention to kill. Angela's triggered, and so she's going to use what she can that's handy and nearby to go ahead and do the kills. I mean, obviously they're in a kitchen. She could have used a knife on this guy, but think about it. It's going to be kind of hard for her to use a knife on this guy, being that he's huge compared to her. Whereas it was a boiling pot or whatever that was on the stove that ended up getting him. So that was what was nearby, and that was effective.
And just his
Right?
pain. I mean, the pain had to be incredible. I
Pain,
liked that
and we
scene.
don't know if he died or not. He possibly could have. Sometimes
Yeah.
people do die from getting really bad burns. Also, if we think about the fact that a beehive, is used in one scene, which was pretty awesome, I thought.
I love
And
that one. That was
you
a
know,
great kill. Very
about
unique.
the only time I've ever seen anything where it was something like that would be Candyman,
Yeah.
But then also, probably the worst, and this is like on the same level of like
Terrifier.
Terrifier, but also on the same level as Evil Dead,
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes.
is a curling iron. You don't see it, but you know exactly what is happening.
I didn't even realize it. I'm sitting here like, oh la la la, like, and Kat's like, what happened with that curling iron? I'm like, what? Like, no, I
Right
didn't.
then and there, right when
I
it
didn't
happened, I
know.
was like thinking, this is like Evil Dead, just with a different implementation,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and so that made it even worse. Again, this is coming from a girl's perspective, when you think about it.
Once you said that, I was like, holy shit, that's even worse than I thought. Now I thought she just got burned
Right.
on her skin, but like the idea that that was, used in a different way, in a very personal, terrible way, that's a very kind of really disgusting, just terrible. I mean, beyond terrible way.
It is, but
It
you
makes
know
it
what?
worse.
But you know what? It's almost like, and I mean, it's almost like Judy got what she deserved,
Well, she was
because
the worst one. She was so
and
mean.
she was so mean, and she was so sexual.
So you had to have the kill pay off to how like the audience was thinking of her, like, oh, she's the worst. So to me, it made sense, especially because she was badgering Angela the most. She had to get the most brutal execution out of anybody. I
Well,
mean,
and
there was no mercy
also, I
there.
think it was payback for Ricky also, because remember, she and Ricky dated the year before. Now she was so mature and wanted to be with the older guys
So
and
Angela
doing
was also like, don't do that to my cousin, kind of thing.
exactly. And there's a scene in there where the young guy that likes Angela is caught in the woods. Is caught basically by Angela and Ricky, which, that's both of them seeing two people that they're interested in, Judy and the young guy.
And it's all because Judy is plotting somehow to make them both jealous. Because
Right.
Judy is an ass. Like, that's the one
Right.
note I have about
So
Judy.
if you
Judy is
think
an
about it,
ass.
Angela pays Judy back not only for herself, but also I think for Ricky.
I think she pays her back tenfold. Jesus Christ. That was terrible. But yeah, I'm just like, la la la. I don't know what's going on. And then you tell me, and I'm like,
I was just so shocked that you didn't realize that was what happened.
I was
I'm
like, oh, she just
come
got
on.
burned on her skin. Like,
Well, you see it in silhouette, the
I
arm
know.
going up, like,
I
oh.
just thought she got burned. It was ridiculous. I don't know why I didn't think there was more going on. Like maybe because of how early it was, I was just like, oh no, no. But no, once you said that, I was like, oh my God. Oh jeez.
Yeah, pretty horrific though, But I mean, I have to
That's
say,
what
I mean,
makes it a good movie, though. Like stuff like
yeah.
that, where I was like, wow, the kills were a little creative. Like, so you could argue, like, is it really a slasher? But I feel like it fits, but it still had that uniqueness that kind of brought it to another level. It did have those weak spots, like you've already highlighted, the acting, the
Yeah,
random
I mean, but
expressions.
there were a
But I
few
like it's campy.
shortcomings. I mean, it's enjoyable,
Yeah,
despite those few little shortcomings, it's definitely worth a watch,
yeah.
especially for the very end, especially if you've never seen it, and even if you knew about it and but have not seen
Like
it like
me.
you definitely should try to watch it. I mean, and I just think it opens up a whole level of discussion about like psychological abuse, basically.
Yes, yes, I
Because if
agree.
you think about it, Angela is psychologically abused,
Yes,
by the aunt being raised, but then she's also psychologically abused
by
at
lots of people at
camp.
camp. Mhm.
It's like she can't be accepted for who she truly is or who he truly is. If you think
Yeah,
about it, you can't even be accepted. Like, even if it was Angela and she is a girl, she wasn't accepted for just being a little bit different than them,
yeah.
because she wasn't on board to do the same things that these kids were doing at summer
So no
camp.
matter how she associated herself, whether a girl or a boy, she felt like wasn't accepted either way. Even if she did want to live as a girl and was okay with it, although it wasn't initially her choice, maybe she would have been okay with it, but she was still not accepted that way. Because the girls, none of them were friends with her.
No, I mean, we had the one camp counselor that was a little bit nice to her,
Yes, yes. But in terms
but
of girls her age, none of them accepted her.
no, no. And I mean, the thing about it is, in hindsight, when you're after the big reveal at the end, you understand why she couldn't do some of the things that
Yeah.
the other girls were
The
doing,
swimming.
but you also, because of her trauma, it also led you to believe, well, she doesn't get close to water
Yeah.
because she
But
was so
there's more than one
traumatized.
reason.
Right. More than one reason. I mean, you don't know that until the end. So it's like, it's one of those things that I think it is good if you can watch it again so that you can just kind of look at those elements, from another, like you're watching it the first time without all the information,
Right.
without all the puzzle pieces fitting together.
And we should clarify that we are analyzing this movie as a standalone, not as a part of the series of movies, because I think once you start looking at them as a group of movies, things change in terms of perception of the films and representation
Yes.
and et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera. So we want to clarify to everyone watching that we've only seen the first one. So we
Yeah.
are commenting just on the first one as if no other ones exist afterwards. So take what we say with that in context.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to realize that because there are actually four more films that follow
Yes.
this,
So things have to
and
develop
there are things that
somewhere.
actually reveal to Ricky later on, I think, in another movie that aren't even revealed. Like, we don't even know that he discovers it at this point, because keep in mind, no arrests are made in this film. No, this Peter's not captured. Like, we don't, all we
Right.
know is that one of the camp counselors says, she's a guy. I
Yeah.
mean, and says she's a guy at that point. And then you've got that horrifying,
And the noise and
the noise and all of that. And she's got the knife, and that what has happened to the poor young guy that, was sweet on her. But the thing
it
about
reminded
it
me of The
is,
Grudge a little bit, that noise. I forgot to say that when you mentioned the noise, but like, the like
I've
there
never
was
seen The Grudge, so I'm gonna now I
oh,
have to
you
watch
got to
that
see it.
part
It's
of it.
you haven't seen it, you'd
I
like
have
it.
never seen it. I've never
I
seen
like
it.
that movie.
Now, but the thing too is, later in the films, and I want to say the actress who played Angela in this film, I think from when I was doing my reading, she's not in the first couple. Actually the second one for sure, and maybe even the third one. Bruce Springsteen's daughter plays Angela.
Wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is
So
weird.
anyway, I think, if I'm not 100% mistaken, I think, is her name Felicia Ross? I believe her name might be Felicia
I'll look it
Ross or
up.
Felisa Ross. But anyway, I want to say, might come back for one of the later films. And I'm not sure how she comes back, if she comes back as
Right.
Angela or somebody else. But believe it or not, she made quite a career, this actress, in other films, other horror films. So I'm interested to see how she grew as an actress after
Right.
this.
Do you
Because
recall any films she had been in? Yeah, it's Felisa Rose.
Felisa Rose. Okay, yes. No, I didn't recognize any of the names.
Krampus, The Devil Returns, Return to Sleepaway Camp. So that must have been down the line.
Yes.
Massacre Academy, Barry, Bearry, which has a knife, so maybe that's a slasher thing.
Right.
Let's see.
I didn't recognize any of them, and she's not in the Krampus that you and I saw during.
No, that's a different Krampus.
Yeah. So clearly, she was able to make a successful career after this movie. So it did not impact her in a way that would have, had her have a, horrible following or anything just from doing that one film.
Yeah, and like I said, before early in our chat, I think if the movie had been super popular, she might have ran into some problems in terms of bullying and stuff from other girls and things like that and other kids, because kids can be mean. But because it really was more of a cult movie and a cult favorite, I think it kind of flew under the radar for most people. And also I think it's more popular now, just as a classic,
right. And I'm wondering
underrated.
what had it resurface, like after all this time. How sometimes something, is an underrated gem and then all of a sudden it resurfaces. Was it because it was an anniversary of some kind,
I think it's just because 80s is so popular now. And it's been popular for a while. I mean, I just think people are so happy to be nostalgic about the 80s. And because this was one of the things in the 80s, like for instance, there's this great documentary and they actually just released a second one. It's called In Search of Darkness. It's a very long documentary all about 80s horror movies and how, iconic and influential they are. And so I think people are like, yeah, but I think this movie has been popular for a little while now. So I'm not really sure what caused the popularity, but all I know is that 80s nostalgia is big right now, including 80s horror nostalgia, as we see in Search of Darkness and In Search of Darkness 2, which just came out. So yeah, I think that could be a reason, perhaps. Who knows?
And I am thinking that I possibly will go and visit some of the other Sleepaway Camp, maybe even just the second one, just to see how it played out. Like I said, Felisa Rose is not the actress in that film. It's actually Bruce Springsteen's daughter. I think her name is Pamela Springsteen. But so I don't know.
Still would be interesting to see where the story would go.
Right. Because I do think that maybe you end up with some information, because I think it also takes place when she's much older.
Yes, from what I understand.
It's not like, it's the next year or like 6 months later or anything like that. So it's when she's much older.
And that would make sense to why they would use a different actress as well.
Exactly.
The original Angela was definitely in Return to Sleepaway Camp. That's the one that she's definitely in.
Oh, so she's in that one as well.
Yes. That's the one I see on IMDb.
Okay, so then that means Springsteen's daughter is only maybe in 2 and 3.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, well then that's pretty interesting though. Then that she revisited, which is,
shows cool. That she doesn't have any kind of deep-seated regrets about doing the role or anything.
No, I mean she probably, if you think about it, if it does have a cult following, she's probably gotten recognition from it.
Oh yeah.
After all these years, and like you said, it wasn't her body being seen at that
exactly
point, kind of thing. And if anybody has done their research on it, they would know, the twisted, or the shock, at the end, being discovered.
Yeah. So overall, we kind of touched on how it's a really different slasher, but it's still in the slasher vein. It's really more psychological. Let's talk about our overall thoughts as we wrap up. So we did this with Terrifier. I kind of put you on the spot and made you do a star rating. Do you want to give a star rating for Sleepaway Camp?
Well, for Sleepaway Camp, I put 2.5 stars.
Oh, really? Less?
Yeah,
that is surprising.
I know it is kind of surprising, but like I said, before, it was enjoyable. I enjoyed watching it. But there were just some elements of it, and I guess it was when it was filmed, like the cheesiness of it and the acting, and I don't know. I guess I'll look at it from a different perspective than you look at, when you're doing your rating on it.
I like campiness, and so that never turns me off or loses star ratings or whatever. And I think the kills were unique. The beehive, the boiling water, the flipping iron, the curling iron.
Yeah.
So all that combined, I feel like it was just so different. And to me, that it wasn't mindless like some slashers can be. To me, it kept it from being a low slasher, like a low rated slasher. So personally, I'd give it like 4.5 stars.
Oh wow.
I liked
Okay,
it a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
It
you
lands
really-
like when we go through the rankings, it lands pretty high up there on my ranking. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I need to go back and revisit like what the stars actually mean, because sometimes I give something a 5 star that some people are like, that was the dumbest movie ever. But I just loved it so much,
Well, you know,
that
everything's subjective. So to
it's
me,
like it's I think to me it's like a love factor. Like it has
yes.
to be, I have to love it in every aspect.
Well, to me, a 5 star would be loving it in every aspect. That's why this doesn't get a 5 for me. Only like things that I could like definitely watch every single year, things that are like near and dear to my heart. Like Halloween, I'd give a 5.
Right.
Or The Graduate, or some of my favorite movies. Heck, okay, this is dumb, but Ace Ventura 2 is the dumbest movie ever, but I'd give it 5 stars because it's one of my favorite childhood, or I guess preteen childhood, whatever you want to call that, favorite movies of that time. I just watched it all the time. So to me, some bad movies I would give 5 stars, and that's just me.
Right. Yeah.
Not
So, I
everyone
don't
would give
know.
Home Alone 2 Lost in New York 5 stars, but I would. So there you go. Take my rating with a grain of salt, guys. But the beauty is that watching movies and your enjoyment of movies and your analysis of movies, that's all subjective, including star ratings, subjective. And so it's always fun to compare and contrast. So if you guys did or did not like Sleepaway Camp, or have any kind of comments to how we felt about it, please drop it below in the comments. Or if you're finding this video on Kat's blog, comment there on her blog about what you thought of Sleepaway Camp. We'd love to hear your opinion. It's all about sharing opinions and kind of a friendly discourse, and just, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So please drop a comment below. But for this time, that's about it for us. Have anything else to add, Kat?
Nope. Unless you want to make some other suggestions for us to watch some movies, we would greatly appreciate that, because this was a movie I had never heard of. So there might be quite a few out there that I still don't know about.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
drop
think
it
we
in the
would
comments. Drop
I don't think we'll
suggestions.
ever be able to see all the movies out there.
No, I wish we could. I wish there was, we talk about this all the time. I wish there was more time in the day, because one, we would always freaking be chatting all the time. Two,
Right.
we'd have endless time for movies, endless time for books as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Mhm.
So we just need more time. Then we could watch every suggestion ever. But if you guys have
Right.
something specific that you'd love to hear us comment on and watch, then please drop that below too, as Kat said. That would be very much appreciated. But what's especially appreciated, even more than any suggestions or comments, is that you took the time to watch the video today, and we
Thank you.
appreciate it. Yes, thank you so much. But that's it for us, like I said, for this time. Till next time, keep on killing it. Bye, guys.
Bye.